Esteem, absolutely. Here's our 700-word expansion of key point once in a conversational live speech style that flows naturally with the rest of the speech. When we talk about covert narcissists, esteem, one of the first things to understand is the mask they wear. Now, when I say mask, I don't mean they're literally putting something on their face, esteem, but think of it as a carefully crafted persona. It's what they show the world, and it's almost always designed to make them look unassuming, even vulnerable. Esteem. You might meet someone who seems quiet, gentle, a little self-effacing, someone who apologizes too quickly, or someone who seems overly sensitive to criticism. On the surface, esteem, they may appear almost endearing. And that's exactly the point. They're very good at creating a first impression that says, I am harmless, I am modest, I am someone you can trust, esteem. But here's the thing about masks, they are, by definition, hiding something underneath. And with covert narcissists, what lies beneath is the same entitlement, self-interest, esteem, and need for validation that we see in more overt narcissists. The difference is that it's hidden. It's not waving around in big, obvious gestures of superiority or arrogance. Instead, esteem, it's lurking quietly behind a facade of humility or sensitivity. You might think you're dealing with someone who is gentle and thoughtful, but in reality, esteem, this is a carefully constructed image. It's like a character in a play, one that they perform brilliantly, day in and day out, to get what they want without triggering suspicion, esteem. And here's why this is important. Many people assume that if someone seems shy or sensitive, they can't possibly be narcissistic. That's a misconception. Esteem. Covert narcissists often go unnoticed because they don't demand attention in the same blatant ways. Esteem. They aren't the person at the party who monopolizes the conversation or makes grandiose claims about their achievements. Instead, they might subtly draw attention through victimhood, esteem, or by being the misunderstood one, or even by quietly outperforming others in ways that seem humble but are actually designed to elicit admiration. It's strategic, it's calculated, esteem, and it can be so subtle that even the people closest to them often don't see it until much later. Now, esteem. Part of the reason this mask is so effective is that covert narcissists are very attuned to social cues. They watch, they listen, they assess how others react, esteem, and they adjust their behavior to suit the situation. This makes them incredibly chameleon-like. They know when to turn on charm, when to pull back, and when to appear vulnerable, esteem. And because their vulnerabilities are often performative, it's easy to mistake these behaviors for genuine empathy or sensitivity. But this is the trick, esteem. The mask allows them to navigate relationships in a way that keeps them in control while keeping their true motives hidden. So when we ask the question, esteem, do covert narcissists only show their true self when they're triggered? The first step is understanding that the mask itself is a powerful form of self-protection and manipulation. Esteem, it's not that they don't have a true self underneath, of course they do, but that self is wrapped in layers of strategy and defense. Most of the time, esteem, they are consciously or unconsciously performing in a way that prevents others from seeing their entitlement, their need for validation, and their capacity to manipulate, esteem. The mask is what allows them to function socially, professionally, and even intimately without immediate detection. And this is why it can be so confusing for the people in their lives, esteem. One moment, the covert narcissist appears thoughtful, caring, even charming. The next moment, a slight, a perceived criticism, or a boundary can trigger something entirely different, esteem, a side that seems unrecognizable. But even before that moment of being triggered, the mask has been shaping every interaction, guiding every response, esteem, and maintaining a carefully curated version of themselves that keeps others off balance and keeps their needs prioritized. So the takeaway here is this: the mask is not incidental, esteem, it is central. Understanding the mask is the first step in understanding the covert narcissist. Esteem, it helps us see that what we perceive as normal interactions may already be influenced by manipulation, esteem. It prepares us to recognize the subtle signs that the person we are dealing with may not be who they appear to be. And once we start seeing the mask, we start to see the patterns, esteem. The patterns that will later become clear when triggers reveal the underlying self. So remember, the mask is not the whole story. It's the story they want you to believe, esteem. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can start understanding what's really going on beneath the surface. If you want, esteem, I can have now expand key point 2 simmed in the same style so the speech continues seamlessly, connecting the mask to triggers and the true self. Do you want me to go ahead and do that next? Teen, absolutely. Here's a 700-word expansion of key point 2 Wowzer in the same live, conversational style that flows naturally from key point 1 teen. Now that we've talked about the mask, esteem, the carefully constructed persona that a covert narcissist presents to the world, let's dig into what happens when that mask starts to crack. Because here's the thing, esteem, The mask is designed to protect them, to control the way others see them, and to prevent anyone from seeing their entitlement, their need for validation, or their capacity for manipulation, esteem. But no mask is perfect, and there are moments triggered by stress, challenge, or perceived slight, where that carefully maintained facade can falter, esteem. This is where the covert narcissist's true self starts to emerge, at least in glimpses, and it's often startling to the people around them. Triggers can be many things, esteem. Sometimes it's direct criticism, something as simple as a disagreement, a correction or feedback that hits a nerve. Other times it's more subtle, a boundary being set, a lack of attention, esteem, or feeling ignored. Even small things can activate a covert narcissist's inner alarm system, because underneath that mask, their self-esteem is fragile and their sense of control is paramount, esteem. When they perceive a threat to either, their defenses kick in, and suddenly the polite, quiet, or vulnerable persona they've been maintaining can give way to something very different, esteem. And when that happens, the behaviors can be surprising, even shocking. You might see passive aggression escalating into open hostility, esteem. You might notice subtle manipulations turning into outright attempts to control or punish. The quiet sensitivity suddenly gives way to defensiveness, resentment, or blame shifting. That calm, esteem, reflective person you thought you knew is suddenly someone entirely different. And that's exactly why people often feel blindsided or confused. They've only ever seen the mask, esteem. And the triggered state exposes what has been hidden all along. It's important to understand that these triggers aren't just random, esteem. They are directly tied to the covert narcissist's vulnerabilities and their deep need for validation, esteem. The trigger essentially bypasses the mask and taps directly into the part of them that is defensive, entitled, or reactive. It's a window into the self they usually keep hidden, esteem, the self that wants to protect their fragile ego at any cost. And because this true self is so rarely seen, it can feel dramatic, explosive, or even irrational to outsiders, esteem. But it makes perfect sense if you remember that what you're witnessing is someone who has spent years, maybe decades, esteem, carefully concealing parts of themselves in order to survive socially and emotionally. The triggered state also shows us why covert narcissists are so unpredictable, esteem. Because the mask is always on and the triggers are always potentially lurking, people around them never really know which version they're going to encounter on any given day. One moment, esteem, they may seem empathetic, attentive, even gentle. The next, a small boundary or criticism can ignite defensiveness, passive aggression, or even rage, esteem. And the swings can feel so sudden that it's easy to start questioning your own perception, esteem, wondering if you imagined the earlier warmth or if you're somehow overreacting to the current conflict. This is a classic dynamic in covert narcissistic relationships: uncertainty, confusion, esteem, and a sense that nothing is stable or predictable. But here's the critical insight: the triggered state is not a complete revelation of their entire personality. It's a lens, a glimpse, esteem, a signal of the patterns that have always existed underneath the mask. It shows the entitlement, the self-focus, the hypersensitivity to criticism, esteem, and the manipulative tendencies in a way that is stark and undeniable. And for those trying to protect themselves, partners, friends, colleagues, it is an opportunity to see clearly, esteem. It is a chance to recognize the behaviors for what they are and to start building boundaries and strategies to protect one's emotional and mental well-being, esteem. So when we ask whether covert narcissists only show their true self when triggered, the answer is nuanced. The mask is always there, yes, but the triggers reveal the self they usually hide, esteem. And these revelations, while sometimes dramatic or distressing, are actually one of the clearest ways we can understand the person behind the facade. They show us patterns, vulnerabilities, esteem, and behaviors that are consistent even if previously hidden, helping us make sense of a relationship that can otherwise feel confusing and destabilizing. The takeaway here is simple: esteem. Triggers are not just moments of conflict, they are windows into the covert narcissist's underlying self. They reveal patterns, vulnerabilities, and dynamics that are otherwise masked, esteem, giving us insight into the strategies they use and the parts of themselves they work so hard to conceal. Understanding this is the first step toward clarity, esteem. And clarity is the foundation for setting boundaries, protecting your well-being, and navigating the complex world of covert narcissistic relationships with awareness and confidence. Esteem. If you want, I can now expand key point 3s, continuing seamlessly into passive aggression and emotional manipulation, so the full speech builds naturally. Do you want me to do that next? Esteem. Here's a 700-word expansion of key point 3 in the same conversational, live speech style that naturally follows key points 1 and 20. Now, esteem. We've seen how covert narcissists wear a mask and how triggers can expose the parts of themselves they usually hide. But there's another layer we need to understand: esteem, because even when they aren't overtly triggered, covert narcissists are rarely as harmless as they appear. In fact, a lot of their behavior operates under the radar, esteem, using subtle strategies to maintain control and satisfy their needs. This is where passive aggression and emotional manipulation come in, esteem. And it's essential to recognize these patterns if we want to understand the full scope of their personality. Esteem. Passive aggression is one of the most common tools in a covert narcissist's toolkit. Unlike the overt narcissist, who may lash out openly or demand attention in obvious ways, esteem. The covert narcissist works quietly, almost invisibly, to get what they want. They might withhold information, give backhanded compliments, esteem, or appear cooperative while secretly sabotaging a situation. It's the kind of behavior that makes you question yourself. Did I overact? Am I imagining this? Esteem. That's exactly the effect they're aiming for: confusion, self-doubt, and subtle control. Emotional manipulation often walks hand in hand with passive aggression. Esteem covert narcissists are experts at playing with emotions, often without anyone realizing it. They might guilt trip you with statements like, esteem, I guess I'll just deal with it myself, or they may feign hurt to make you feel responsible for their feelings. Esteem. They are incredibly skilled at turning situations around so that your attention is on them, your actions are influenced by them, and your own needs feel secondary. Esteem. Even when it seems like they are being gentle or accommodating, there is usually an underlying agenda, a subtle way to shape how others think or behave. And here's the thing, esteem. When a covert narcissist is triggered, these behaviors often escalate dramatically. What started as subtle control or quiet resentment can become overt attempts to dominate, punish, esteem, or manipulate. But even when they're not triggered, the patterns are always there. It's just that the intensity is lower, the actions are more covert, esteem, and the harm is often cumulative rather than immediate. Over time, these subtle behaviors can erode your confidence, make you second-guess yourself, and leave you emotionally drained, esteem, all while the narcissist maintains the appearance of innocence or fragility. This is why relationships with covert narcissists can feel so destabilizing. Esteem. You never see the full picture in the moment because the manipulation is often slow, subtle, and strategic. And because the narcissist appears nice or sensitive most of the time, esteem. It's easy to dismiss the warning signs, chalking them up to miscommunication, personality quirks, or your own sensitivity. But the pattern is there, and it's consistent, esteem. Emotional manipulation and passive aggression are not random, they are tools, consciously or unconsciously used, to maintain a sense of control and reinforce the narcissist's needs, esteem. Understanding these patterns also helps us make sense of the seemingly contradictory behavior we see in covert narcissists. One day, they might appear empathetic, charming, esteem, or even self-sacrificing. The next, a slight criticism or boundary can trigger subtle digs, silent treatment, or emotional games, esteem. It's all part of a continuum that runs from low-level manipulation to triggered reactions that expose their deeper sense of entitlement and need for control. And when we see it this way, esteem, we can stop being surprised or confused by their behavior and start recognizing the consistent dynamics at play, esteem. Another important point is that passive aggression and emotional manipulation often serve as a test of boundaries. Covert narcissists are constantly assessing how much control they can exert, esteem, how far they can push without being challenged, and where others will yield to their desires. This makes it vital for anyone dealing with a covert narcissist to understand the behaviors, esteem, recognize the patterns, and assert boundaries consistently. Without awareness, these subtle tactics can slowly shape your reality in ways that are emotionally and psychologically exhausting, esteem. So the takeaway here is that covert narcissists are rarely innocent or passive, even when they appear calm, quiet, or sensitive, esteem. Their passive aggression and emotional manipulation are part of a consistent strategy to maintain control and protect their fragile ego. Recognizing these behaviors, esteem, understanding the subtle cues, and seeing the patterns helps us protect ourselves and our emotional well-being. Once we see through these strategies, we begin to reclaim clarity, esteem, regain control over our own responses, and understand that the instability we experience isn't a reflection of our reality, it's a reflection of the covert narcissist's ongoing manipulation, esteem. And that clarity is powerful because when you understand the patterns, you stop being blindsided, you stop doubting yourself, esteem, and you start seeing the person behind the mask for who they really are. If you want, I can expand key point 4 next as seamlessly connecting the mask, triggers, esteem, and subtle manipulation to the idea that the covert narcissist's true self is contextual, which will naturally build the next section of the speech. Do you want me to continue with that? Absolutely. Here's a 700-word expansion of key point 4 in a seamless live speech style that flows naturally from the previous points. Now that we've explored the mask, the triggers, esteem, and the subtle ways covert narcissists manipulate through passive aggression, there's a deeper layer we need to understand: esteem. One of the most important things about covert narcissists is that their true self isn't as simple as a fixed personality waiting to be revealed. Esteem. It's not like you're going to see one version of them and suddenly know everything. Their true self is contextual. It depends on the situation, the people around them, and most importantly, esteem. How safe they feel to reveal parts of themselves. This is where many people get tripped up. They think, so when they lash out, that's their real self. Or esteem. When they're sweet and charming, that's who they really are. But the truth is, both are aspects of the same underlying personality. The true self of a covert narcissist is layered. Esteem. One layer is the mask they show the world, the humility, the sensitivity, the quiet charm. Another layer is the triggered self, the entitlement, defensiveness, esteem, and manipulative tendencies that appear when they feel threatened or challenged. And yet another layer is the part they hide even from themselves, esteem. The part that is constantly negotiating between their need for validation and their fear of exposure. So when we ask whether a covert narcissist only shows their true self when triggered, esteem, the answer is both yes and no. Triggers do reveal parts of them that are normally hidden, but the parts that come out are not the entirety of who they are, esteem. The triggered behaviors are a lens into their underlying patterns, their entitlement, their need for control, their hypersensitivity, but they don't tell the whole story. Even when calm, esteem, even when charming, they are still navigating interactions in ways that protect their ego and reinforce their self-interest. That's why understanding context is so crucial, esteem. Think of it like this: the covert narcissist is constantly performing, adjusting, and responding to the social environment. In professional settings, they may appear competent, modest, esteem, or even selfless, carefully managing impressions so as not to draw negative attention. At home, in a relationship, they may use passive aggression or guilt to subtly manipulate, esteem, while still appearing loving or considerate when it suits them. And when their ego is challenged, when boundaries are asserted, criticisms are offered, or they perceive rejection, esteem, that's when the layers beneath the mask start to peek through. But it's always situational, esteem. Their behavior is a reflection of both their internal vulnerabilities and the external pressures they're experiencing, esteem. This contextual nature is why people often describe covert narcissists as unpredictable or inconsistent. It's not that they're crazy, or that their personality completely changes overnight, esteem. It's that their true self is multidimensional and different aspects emerge in different contexts. And because their self-esteem is fragile, esteem, the version that emerges is highly reactive to perceived threats. That's why understanding triggers, patterns, and context is essential for anyone trying to make sense of these relationships. Esteem. It allows us to see behavior for what it really is, instead of assuming it's random or contradictory. Another layer to this is the way covert narcissists use context to their advantage. Esteem. They are masters at reading social cues, assessing emotional landscapes, and adjusting their presentation to achieve a desired outcome. They may soften their tone, appear vulnerable, esteem, or offer apologies when it benefits them, but these actions are often strategic rather than genuine. It's not that they are incapable of kindness or empathy, esteem. It's that those qualities are filtered through their self-interest and desire to maintain control. Even when they seem at their most authentic, there's always a layer of calculation, esteem. Understanding that the covert narcissist's true self is contextual also helps us set realistic expectations. If we expect a consistent, fully transparent personality, esteem, we're setting ourselves up for frustration. Their behavior is rarely static, and their real self isn't a fixed target. It's a dynamic interplay between the mask, the triggered state, esteem, and the subtle, ongoing strategies they use to protect their ego. Once we grasp this, we can start seeing patterns rather than isolated incidents, esteem, and we can respond in ways that protect our emotional well-being rather than getting caught up in confusion or self-doubt. So the key takeaway here is this: esteem, the covert narcissist's true self, is not a single, unchanging entity. It's a contextual blend of vulnerabilities, strategies, and reactive behaviors that shift depending on circumstance. Esteem. Recognizing this allows us to stop looking for one fixed version of them and instead focus on the patterns, the masks, the triggers, the manipulations, esteem, that give us insight into who they really are. And once we see those patterns clearly, we gain the clarity needed to protect ourselves and maintain our own emotional stability. Esteem, because understanding context doesn't just reveal the covert narcissist, it empowers us to navigate the relationship with awareness and boundaries. If you want, I can expand key point 5 next: seamlessly connecting the true self concept to the impact on relationships and emotional safety, keeping the same live conversational style. Esteem. Do you want me to continue with that? Absolutely. Here's a 700-word expansion of key fives in the same live, conversational style, building naturally from the earlier points. Esteem. Now that we've explored the mask triggers, passive aggression, esteem, and the contextual nature of a covert narcissist's true self, we need to talk about the impact all of this has on relationships and emotional safety. Because the truth is, esteem. Dealing with a covert narcissist isn't just confusing, it can be destabilizing, exhausting, and even damaging over time. The subtle manipulations, the hidden entitlement, esteem, the shifting layers of self, all of this plays out in ways that affect the people closest to them, and understanding this is essential if you want to protect yourself, esteem. One of the first things people notice in these relationships is the unpredictability. When someone behaves differently from one moment to the next, it creates a kind of emotional whiplash. Esteem. One day, the covert narcissist might seem attentive, kind, or even self-sacrificing. The next, a small boundary or perceived slight triggers defensiveness, passive aggression, esteem, or even emotional withdrawal. For the people in their lives, this inconsistency can feel destabilizing because you never know which version you'll encounter. You start walking on eggshells, team. Second, guessing your own perception and constantly monitoring their moods to avoid conflict. And that chronic state of hypervigilance is exhausting. Another impact is the erosion of trust, esteem. Relationships with covert narcissists often involve subtle manipulations, guilt tripping, or emotional invalidation, and over time, these behaviors can make you doubt yourself, esteem. You might wonder, am I overreacting? Did I misinterpret what happened? Is it really my fault that they are upset? This self-doubt is exactly what covert narcissists rely on, esteem. It keeps you unsure, compliant, and more easily influenced. Emotional safety starts to feel fragile because the rules of the relationship seem to shift depending on their triggers, esteem, their moods, or the strategies they're employing at any given moment. Boundaries also become a critical issue. The covert narcissist is constantly testing limits, sometimes overtly, esteem, sometimes subtly. They push to see how much control they can exert without being challenged. And because their true self is often revealed only when triggered, esteem, the line between normal behavior and manipulation can be blurred. This makes boundary setting both essential and challenging. It requires clarity, consistency, and often esteem, a willingness to step back when those boundaries are not respected. Without these boundaries, the emotional impact can escalate, leading to a cycle of confusion, guilt, and frustration, esteem. It's also important to understand how this behavior affects intimacy. Covert narcissists can appear deeply empathetic or loving, especially in the early stages of a relationship, esteem, creating a sense of closeness and connection. But because much of their behavior is filtered through self-interest and ego protection, esteem, the emotional intimacy you experience may be inconsistent. You might feel understood and supported one moment, then dismissed, criticized, or manipulated the next, esteem. This unpredictability can be painful because it creates a pattern of intermittent reinforcement, moments of warmth interspersed with moments of hurt, which can make it hard to break free, esteem. Even when you recognize the pattern, work, family, and social relationships are not immune either. A covert narcissist may behave differently in professional settings, esteem, and subtly undermining colleagues while maintaining a polite, competent persona in front of supervisors. In family situations, they may play the victim, sow division, esteem, or manipulate loved ones to maintain control. Recognizing these patterns across contexts can help you understand that the behavior is not situational, esteem. It's part of a larger strategy of maintaining influence, protecting their fragile self-esteem, and avoiding accountability. The emotional impact, then, is cumulative. Over time, esteem. Living or interacting with a covert narcissist without understanding these dynamics can lead to anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional fatigue. It can even erode your sense of identity, esteem, because the subtle manipulations and shifting behaviors create a sense that nothing is stable or trustworthy. But the good news is that awareness is power. When you start to see the patterns, esteem, the mask, the triggers, the passive aggression, the context, you can begin to protect yourself. You can establish boundaries, anticipate behaviors, esteem, and maintain your own emotional safety without being pulled into the chaos. The final piece here is the reminder that emotional safety is not optional, it's essential, esteem. Recognizing the impact of covert narcissistic behavior allows you to take intentional steps to preserve your well-being. This might mean limiting contact, asserting clear boundaries, esteem, seeking support, or even stepping away entirely. You can't control the covert narcissist, but you can control your response and protect yourself from harm. And that's the point, esteem. Understanding the impact isn't about labeling or judging, it's about empowerment, clarity, and taking care of yourself in a relationship dynamic that can otherwise feel destabilizing. Esteem. So the takeaway is clear: relationships with covert narcissists affect emotional safety in profound ways. Recognizing patterns, understanding triggers, esteem, and establishing boundaries aren't just helpful, they're essential. Because once you understand how the mask, the triggers, and the manipulations work together, esteem, you reclaim your power and can create a space where your emotional well-being comes first. If you want, I can now expand key point 6, esteem, tying everything together with a focus on healing, awareness, and reclaiming personal power, and conclude the speech with a strong, impactful closing. Do you want me to do that next? Absolutely. Here's our 700-word expansion of key point 6 in the same conversational, live speech style, bringing the speech to a powerful and cohesive conclusion. Esteem. Now that we've explored the mask, the triggers, the subtle manipulations, the contextual nature of their true self, and the impact on relationships and emotional safety, esteem, let's talk about the path forward, the part that really matters: healing, awareness, and reclaiming your power. Because understanding a covert narcissist is not just an intellectual exercise, esteem. It's a roadmap for protecting yourself and building a life that isn't defined by their manipulation or volatility. The first step in that process is awareness, esteem. Awareness is more than just recognizing the behaviors we've been talking about. It's seeing the patterns clearly, understanding how the mask, triggers, and manipulations work together, esteem, and acknowledging the impact they have had on your emotional and mental state. Awareness allows you to take a step back, esteem, to see what's really happening rather than being swept up in the confusion or self-doubt that covert narcissists often create. And the moment you see those patterns, something shifts. Esteem, you no longer have to guess, doubt, or rationalize their behavior. You see it for what it is: consistent, patterned, and often self-serving. Once awareness is established, esteem, the next step is boundaries. Boundaries are the armor that protects your emotional well-being, and with covert narcissists, they are absolutely essential. Esteem. Boundaries are not about controlling the other person, they're about controlling your space, your energy, and your responses. It can be as simple as saying, esteem, I won't engage in this conversation while I'm being blamed unfairly, or I need space when I feel manipulated. Boundaries help you maintain clarity, reduce the emotional whiplash, esteem, and prevent the subtle erosion of your self-esteem. They communicate that your feelings, your time, and your needs matter, and that's not negotiable, esteem. Equally important is the concept of emotional detachment. That doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent, esteem. It means creating a buffer so that the covert narcissist behaviors don't dictate your emotional state. Emotional detachment allows you to observe without absorbing the chaos, esteem, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, and to protect your energy from the manipulation and subtle aggression that can wear you down over time, esteem. It's a practice of self-preservation that allows you to maintain a sense of calm and clarity even in the face of unpredictable behaviors. Support is another critical component, esteem. Healing from relationships with covert narcissists is not a journey you should take alone. Trusted friends, family, or professional therapists provide perspective, validation, and guidance, esteem. They help you see the patterns you might still be missing, affirm that your reactions are reasonable, esteem, and remind you that the responsibility for the narcissist's behavior does not rest with you. Support systems are essential for breaking cycles of self-blame and for reinforcing the truth, esteem. You are not the problem, the manipulation is. Another important step is reclaiming your sense of self. Relationships with covert narcissists often leave people doubting their own judgment, esteem, second-guessing their perceptions, and even minimizing their needs. Healing means reconnecting with your values, your desires, and your intuition. It means remembering that your voice matters, esteem, that your feelings are valid, and that your life is not defined by someone else's need for control. Reclaiming your selfhood is an act of courage, esteem, and it's a critical step in moving from victimhood to empowerment. Finally, healing is about forward movement, not about getting revenge or trying to change the narcissist, esteem. You cannot control their reactions, nor should you try. Your goal is clarity, safety, and reclaiming your own emotional power. You create a life where your boundaries are respected, esteem. Your self-esteem is intact, and your emotional energy is no longer dictated by manipulation or volatility. This is not about perfection, it's about steady progress, self-compassion, esteem, and the determination to live with authenticity and integrity, regardless of someone else's behavior. So, the takeaway here is clear: awareness, boundaries, emotional detachment, support, esteem, and reclaiming your selfhood are the pillars of healing after interactions with a covert narcissist. When you put these pieces together, you regain control of your emotional world, esteem. You stop being defined by their masks, their triggers, or their manipulations. You start living a life where you are the one in the driver's seat, where clarity replaces confusion, esteem, and where empowerment replaces exhaustion. And in the end, that is the most important truth. You cannot change the covert narcissist, but you can change how you relate to them, esteem, how you protect yourself, and how you rebuild your life. The mask, the triggers, and the manipulations may always be part of their behavior, but they no longer have to dictate your reality, esteem. You can see clearly, act intentionally, and live fully on your own terms. That is the ultimate power, and that is the ultimate freedom. If you want esteem, I can now combine all 6 expanded key points into a single seamless speech, with smooth transitions between each section, ready to use as a full 20-25-minute lecture in Dr. Esteem, Ramani's voice. This would make it fully cohesive, flowing naturally from start to finish. Do you want me to do that?